Hey everyone, it's Miranda Darrow here, tackling another genre of fiction this month. Last month, we talked about women's fiction, so check out previous videos in my channel for that. A new month, a new genre. For October, in honor of Halloween, we're going to talk about horror fiction and what makes it one of the most fascinating and diverse genres. Horror is more than just blood and guts and jump scares, although those can be fun. It's a genre that delves into human fears, explores the unknown, and like all speculative fiction, says multitudes about the society we live in. Full disclosure, I will admit that horror is not my favorite genre. I tell myself that I don't really read much of it or watch it, but when I started looking through my Goodreads book of books that I've read, I find out that I'm lying to myself, and I've actually read quite a bit. And I've also watched my fair share too, movies and series like Stranger Things. I have no idea what this says about me, that I'm mentally suppressing my own interest in the genre. It could be some psychological effect in play, horror fan denial syndrome. But enough about me. Let's dive into horror, its many subgenres, and why it's still so popular with readers and writers alike. What is horror fiction? At its core, horror is designed to evoke fear, unease, or suspense in readers. It can be psychological, supernatural, or grounded in the real world. Horror thrives on what if. What if that old house is haunted? What if that stranger isn't human? What if your worst nightmares come true? Whether it's ghosts, monsters, or terrors of what humans can do to each other, horror taps into primal fears. The Horror Writers Association website, which is www.horror.org, states that it's an international organization of writers and publishers and publishing professionals dedicated to promoting dark literature in the interest of those who write it. HWA doesn't actually define horror as a genre, but I lump it together as story in which the focus is on creating a feeling of fear. This definition, like the brief dark literature label on their website, leaves a lot of room for interpretation. Some people find serial killers terrifying. Others think that demons or paranormal entities are the worst. My personal favorites involve survivor scenarios, pushing regular people past their breaking points. Fear is subjective, and that's why horror can be so varied and fun to explore. Horror can range from the gruesome to the atmospheric, but it's almost always rooted in universal fears. Let's start with some common horror themes and tropes. One is survival. Horror often explores the raw, primal desire to survive. The classic horror plot is a slasher chasing victims through a remote area until just one girl survives. Survival can also include a group of survivors battling in a post-apocalyptic world or our regular world, but thrown into a catastrophic situation. Examples include the TV series Yellow Jackets, with a high school girls' soccer team in a plane crash in rural Canada, or the novel The Hunger by Alma Katsu, which reimagines the Donner Party's ill-fated journey with a supernatural twist. Both show the lengths that people will go to survive. I'd also include Stephen Graham Jones's My Heart is a Chainsaw, which explores a love of classic slasher films while adding a Native American twist. Isolation is another classic horror theme, whether you're stranded in a remote location or feeling emotionally isolated from the people around you. Movies include The Thing, in which a research team trapped in Antarctica with a shape-shifting monster is attacking, a Dead Calm, with people trapped in a boat with a killer in the middle of the ocean. My husband wanted to add Tremors, the movie in which people needed to walk softly or trigger huge worms and they were trapped in a town. For novels, there's The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling, in which there's a deep cave system and the people are cut off from help. And the real danger is psychological. I'd also add Max Brooks' Devolution, a remote community coming face to face with Sasquatch. Another romance trope or theme is the unknown. Horror loves to explore things they cannot explain. The unknown is inherently frightening because it triggers our fears of uncertainty. Think of The Haunting of Hill House by the amazing Shirley Jackson, who also wrote one of my favorite horror short stories, The Lottery. In The Haunting of Hill House, the house itself is an unexplained malevolent force. Or Lovecraftian horror, which deals with cosmic horrors and octopus-like creatures in unexpected places. How did that get here? Then we have monsters. From vampires to zombies and ghosts and demons, monsters are a staple in horror. Since its inception, dating back to Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, viewers have been challenged to say, who is the real monster? Is it the creature or is it Dr. Frankenstein? A modern example is The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle, which reimagines Lovecraft's mythos in a modern context. Now let's review some subgenres of horror. Whether you prefer supernatural terror, psychological, or a good old ghost story, horror has lots of subgenres to explore. Psychological horror focuses on the mind, often creating tension through unreliable narrators or slow building dread. Tiffany D. Jackson's White Smoke follows a young woman, Marigold, who is recovering from a drug problem. Looking for a fresh start, her family moves into a spooky old house. Other characters aren't sure whether to believe her, and Mari begins to doubt herself. But things are definitely off in this house. I recently read The Night in the Library by Eva Jurchek, where a group of young people hid in a library basement to get high and play some games, and then the murders started. I also recently watched Bodies, 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 in which a group of friends and their guests are trapped at a luxury mansion during a hurricane, and then the bodies start piling up. Fear and paranoia reign. They turn on each other, not knowing until the bloody end what caused the first death. Supernatural horror brings in such fantastical creatures like ghosts, demons, and other worldly beings. TV shows like Sleepy Hollow, Stranger Things, and the very long-running series Supernatural have featured almost every creature imaginable. A recent novel, later made into a movie, featuring supernatural horror is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, where a South American expedition encounters the unexpected in the jungle. Camera Maria Machado's Her Body and Other Parties is a series of short stories combining supernatural elements with feminist commentary in hauntingly surreal ways. Body horror is my least favorite subgenre. If you can't handle gore, body horror is probably not for you. This subgenre explores the terrifying possibilities of physical transformation or mutilation. The classic example is The Fly and the inexplicable popularity of the Saw movies, which I have not actually sawed or seen. Anyway, one body horror story I actually enjoyed was Margaret Atwood's short story, The Dead Hand Still Loves You. The plot was a character who lost a hand, but the hand ran around like a spider, stalking the former love of the hand's former owner. Octavia Butler's Clay's arc delves into intersection of alien invasion and body horror, exploring themes of control, infection, and manipulation of the human body. I have not tackled that yet, but I do love Butler's work. Gothic horror has been around for centuries, blending eerie settings with psychological dread. If you want to read more Shirley Jackson, check out We've Always Lived at the Castle, another Gothic delight, and The Haunting of Hill House would also qualify here too. Frances Perkin Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper falls into Gothic, as would The Stranger Upstairs by Lisa Matlin, a modern take with a disgraced social influencer buying a murder house with the intent of rehabbing it as her new social media project to rehab the house and her image. And Sylvia Moreno Garcia's Mexican Gothic brings a fresh Latinx perspective to Gothic genre with a crumbling mansion, family secrets, and a dark, foreboding atmosphere. Finally, we'll tackle a subgenre of post-apocalyptic horror. The end of the world is a fertile ground for horror, very popular lately. A quiet place, a universe in which the creatures will attack if you make any noise. That would be a really tough environment to raise kids. So would the threat from the other people presented in the dystopian universe of The Road, which was a movie, but formerly a novel by Cormac McCartney. What if opening your eyes in public could lead you to become a crazed killer, like Bird Box, a novel by Josh Malerman before it was made into a movie starring Sandra Bullock? And of course, these subgenres, themes, and tropes can overlap, like zombie apocalypse universes, like in 28 Days Later and The Walking Dead and Colson Whitehead's novel Zone 1. Why do we love horror so much, decades after its big popularity in the 50s? Why do people keep coming back? Part of it is the adrenaline rush. A good scare can be thrilling, but there's more to it than that. Horror fiction lets us control our fears in a safe environment. Whether we're afraid of death, losing control, the unknown, horror allows us to explore these fears through stories that ultimately come to an end. There's something cathartic about that. Horror also reflects societal concerns. Modern horror often addresses anxieties about race, gender, and power. Jordan Peele has a trio of movies, Us, Nope, and the iconic Get Out, showing how horror can be used to explore racism in America. I personally love Nope. Horror is often at its best when it holds up a mirror to the world and forces us to face the real-life terrors lurking just below the surface of society, like those creepy Purge movies where the only thing keeping us from murdering all of our neighbors is the lack of a super dumb holiday. I prefer my social commentary with a bit more subtlety, like the trigger effect, where neighbors are willing to kill each other, but viewers and readers get to see the motivation that happens before the mayhem. There are some misconceptions about horror. One major misconception is that it's all about gore or shock value. Sure, there's plenty of that in some of the subgenres, but many of the best horror stories are more about the psychological tension and emotional depth than blood and guts. One example is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. It's a fun example of how horror can be terrifying and heartfelt, blending suburban life with bloodthirsty terror. That's my take on horror fiction. It's a genre that evokes fear, but it also reflects on the complexity of the human experience and pressing issues of our time. What kind of horror do you love? Are you drawn to psychological mind games? Or are you all about the supernatural? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're looking for some more modern horror recommendations, stay tuned for my video that's coming next week, in which I'll give a list of over 30 recommended horror novels from the last 10 years for people who aren't obsessed with horror. Maybe it's gateway horror for the genre shop. Until then, happy writing, and make sure that you like, subscribe, and click the bell so that you're notified of other content on my channel. Thank you.